start this shindig?
Yeah, let's start this. We got some torturous stories for you to go through.
Welcome, one and all.
The wood, air, and metal. The follow-up to what happens after you prep for a gig and prep and prep and prep, and then show up. Then what happens? Tim, damn it, I dropped my text.
All good things.
Take us away into the world of what happened last Wednesday. That was totally time.
Yeah, so as we were talking last week, I had a live stream. I'm not sure if anybody checked it out, but you can still find it.
Yeah, I watched like 10 minutes of it. I had to teach, but
so you can still check it out, Adam. It's still out there. Oh my gosh, hold on. It's still out there, and you can find it. But it was a comedy of errors the night. It was the joys of... It was like a real gig, you know, where things don't work. So we got there on time, got there early, got set up, got to do a nice sound check. Was running the whole red plate Fender thing with everything I talked about last week. And about 10 minutes before we were going to go on, there was just crazy sound coming from the red plate. Well, at first I couldn't quite tell where it was coming from. Eventually, then I was like seeing if it was a pedal or something, so I like unplugged every pedal, did the whole shtick, and then it really wasn't going away, this sound, and then all of a sudden, the red plate just turned off.
Like depowered completely.
Like no power, nothing. Like the red light, the
that's not good.
Yeah, and at the same time, I was messing with stuff. So, could I have caused a short? Like, because at this point, I was trying to like just get rid of it and get rid of the sound. But anyway, yeah, something ended up blowing a fuse on the red plate about 10 minutes before, which was like, okay, crap. And then, now luckily, I had a backup amp. Yeah. And then I also, in this particular group, there's distortion stuff through. And I actually was really, really close to not bringing a distortion pedal. And I actually thought, and in fact, at that point I had unplugged it. So in the earlier, I didn't even have it plugged in the loop. Because for one, the red plate's distortion is like, there's no pedal I've ever found that's even like in the same ballpark.
Just from your videos, it sounds absolutely incredible.
Oh man, wait till one day you're gonna hear it live. And you're gonna, It's amazing amp. It's my baby, and of course it died. So, so I'm thinking like, crap, what happened to the amp? I hope nothing bad happened to it. Got to go on in 5 to 10 minutes, and I'm like, I don't even have it as, like I don't know, like how am I gonna do some of these songs? So like I'm gonna have to rewire. So I had to rewire everything back up because I had this kind of weird wiring scheme going on, and then I ended up running it all in series basically to the input of the Fender amp, which ironically, so I have a Fender Hot Rod Deluxe, which I actually bought used off the gear page. It's been 10 to 15 years, I think.
Oh, nice.
And when I bought it, the guy had done some mods to it. Like rebiased it, did some stuff with the tubes or whatever, and then he upgraded the speaker. I think I only paid like $400 for it or something too, which is a great deal. You can't even find them used even without mods, that cheap now. I get kind of lucky finding some good deals that way. Anyway, and that amp is notoriously bad for reliability. However, that I've done hundreds of gigs with that thing, and like my daughter has come with me with gigs before, and she wanted to come, and I remember her like dropping it down the stairs. It like hard like concrete stairs, like dung dung dung, and I'm like, crap, it's probably not gonna work. Never had an issue. That thing works like it's like clockwork. It's been left in the car in the freezing, like when it's 2 degrees outside. It's been left in the car when it's 110 degrees outside, and it like nothing kills that amp. Of course, now it's gonna die since I said this.
Exactly.
But it was reliable as ever that night, And the nice thing about the Fender Hot Rod series, if you haven't, like the Hot Rod Deluxe and the DeVille, is they're just amazing pedal amps. Like some of the amps I have, like I have a Mesa and a Marshall and even the Red Plate. The Red Plate takes pedals pretty well, but like the Mesa takes pedals horrible. The one I have, like it's very picky. It only likes like five of the pedals or like a couple of the pedals that I have, and pretty much hates all the rest. They just sound horrible. And you'd even think like, man, who would ever want this pedal? It just sounds terrible through this amp. But in the hot rod, every pedal I have sounds great. Like they really sound good in that amp. It takes pedals amazing. So if you ever hear like a good pedal amp, that's what it means. It basically means like any pedal you put on it just sounds great. It sounds like what you would think it would sound like. But anyway, so yeah, then the Red Plate died. I rearranged all the stuff. Quickly like readjusted all the levels too, because all the levels on the pedals were now different because of where they were and what they were doing, and basically got that together right about like 8 o'clock when we were going to start. And then the guy that runs the live stream was like, it's not working. The live stream's not working. So we're sitting there, and it's funny because he was like, hey, we're going to go live. And then like I know Paul and I, like we shared it on our thing, like, hey, check out this link. And then it just disappeared. And then he tried again and it disappeared, and tried again and it kept like canceling out. And then he found out like the sonic wall for the company like was blocking something. So, and then the IT place was closed, so they weren't going to fix it anytime soon. But he had done this before. We had to like go around the router or whatever to get to the internet. And none of that worked. So eventually we used my phone as a hotspot, and I had him connect through my phone.
There you go. Okay, pretty darn good.
And then, but we started about 40 some minutes late, you know.
Yeah.
And at that point, Paul and I, like, we had no idea if we were going to play or not. I think we both started the set pretty rough, but it went okay.
I mean, from what I chimed in, probably about 40 minutes into your set.
Was that the first minute of the set?
No, like after you legitimately started playing. Like I remember you texted me.
Yeah.
Before you were filling me in. I'm like, well, this is at least podcast material.
Yeah, right.
It's something salvageable from the night. When you started it, it was like, all right, well, okay, yeah, I have my phone, so I jumped in for about 10 minutes.
You know what's funny too is I called ahead about because they have a Fender Twin there. And it's pretty nice, you know, and I like Twins fine. And I was like, I don't really want to bring my Fender amp if I can help it. And I texted him and I said, hey, is the Fender working? And he's like, yeah, last time we used it, it was making a bunch of noise. I was like, well, guess I'm not using that one either. So that could have been an interesting night if I would have not brought the extra backup.
So lesson is always bring, if you can, always bring it. That's crazy. It reminds me of like, well, I mean, I already told the story about breaking all the strings, which is the reason why I bought another acoustic steel string.
Right.
You know, it's like you learn. It's like, oh, next time I'm going to have a backup so I don't have to worry about this.
Yeah, sure.
But then one of my old teachers, Francois Fowler, the head guy at the Youngstown State, he was right before his master recitals. You know, he was doing a warm up on his Humphrey, you know, $10,000 classical like we all have, type of thing. And he was saying like, I finished it. I finished my warm up. I put it in the case. I grab my footstool. I stand up. I trip. Throw the footstool. Slow motion, circling through the air. Bam! Right into the soundboard. Like sticks right into the thing.
Dang.
Slid through, just boonk, right into it. He's like, I couldn't like not go on. So he's like, I pulled the thing out and I walked out and played with an extra sound hole in my guitar and played the recital. He's like, it went great, but you know, obviously I had a bit of an issue after that. You know, it was more structural damage than it wasn't structural damage to the extent of damaging the output of the guitar, but it would clearly having an extra hole isn't going. It's like, yeah, I need to send this in and get it fixed, which is funny because I watch that repair guy channel now and it's just fascinating to see what he does. Like, because some of the repairs he does because of clients, and other ones he just likes a challenge.
Yeah.
So he's like, yeah, I'll give it a shot. What the heck? Why not? Taking a chips in and making it actually playable, or taking these old like 1930s guitars that have had many dubious fixes on them and being like, yeah, let's just redo it. Like he like takes the back right off of it and redoes all the bracing inside. It's like that is not a cheap fix. You might as well buy another good guitar for that much money. Holy crap! But everybody's got their stories.
Yeah, sure. Gabe was telling us at the gig that someone had borrowed a cello from, I think, a professor at Oberlin, maybe.
Oh, no.
And
I already don't like where this
they were playing it, and like the bridge snapped. So the strings like slammed, or the whole thing like slammed. Luckily, it didn't crack like the top or anything. and he said like the person that was playing like was just in tears, like they felt so horrible that it happened. And the husband of the person who they were borrowing it from was like in the front row, like. But I guess he was like, it's okay, don't it'll be all right,
Yeah. I mean, in one sense, thank God it was just like whatever that the string post or whichever, it just snaps, because that I can imagine that being significantly less expensive than the top cracking. Like,
yeah, I guess what happens, like, right? There's enough tension, I guess, that sometimes when that happens, it'll actually like crack the top.
Yeah. No, thank you. That's cellos are like mortgages. Same thing with violins. Everybody's like, "How can you spend that much on a guitar?" And I'm like, "Dude, you realize how cheap this is compared to playing violin or getting like a decent concert violin? It's like you're talking $50K easy." So easy. I remember it's like we all know somebody that had the old the mortgage on a violin type of thing. It's like, yeah, I'll be paying this for 30 years, and it's like, well, that's.
You ever thought like what an interesting investment that is, though? Like, could you imagine? It's so easy for us to buy guitars in a lot of ways, right? Like they're relatively cheap, and you can have a bunch of them. So you never really like hone in on. I mean, you try. You maybe have a favorite or two, but like if you play a $50,000 violin, like all the little the intricacies or like oddities about the instrument. Like, you can't just change them, really. Like, you kind of just have to accept what they are and then work with it. And that becomes, like, your quote-unquote sound or whatever. I don't know. I guess I don't know how much trading or, like, upgrading or whatever people do in that world.
Yeah, I have no clue. That might have been an interesting person to get a violinist on. And...
Yeah, especially somebody who maybe, just to find out. Like if you buy that $100,000 violin, your parents mortgage it or whatever when you're 18, and you decide you're going to the conservatory, or whoever's paying for it, do you just accept? Like, do you just say this is the instrument I'm having the rest of my life, or do you say like, after you graduate, you're like, okay, I'm going to try to upgrade this, take out a second mortgage,
exactly,
to the $150,000 version, yeah,
exactly, and that gets to the point of like. I remember reading an article how, like, in guitar pricing, up to $1,000, you get like your different ranges of where it stays pretty static in quality. Like up to $300, you're not going to get anything that's going to be like blaringly better than 150. It's mild, but it's not huge. But between like 3 and 7, there's a significant leap in there. Once you get about the $500 to $700 mic, and I'm thinking acoustic, not electric. You're starting to get with real woods, better manufacturing, more consistent manufacturing. Like that's where the Taylor Academies come in, and those are actually really nice for the money. I've been floored. Like a student of mine got one a couple of years ago. She just started, and she's like, "Oh, I just bought this Taylor Academy," and I'm like, "Oh, I haven't seen these things yet." And it's got a bevel. I mean, it's
right.
It doesn't look like there's any real paint on it, so there's no shellac or anything. The thing was booming loud. Action was fantastic. I was like, this is seriously impressive for the price. That's awesome. And then, between 500 to 1,000-ish, there's ones that'll stick out, but nothing where it's like, whoa. But when you get to the 1,000 to 2,000 mark is where you're starting to get a really good quality instrument. And then from 2,000 to 3,000, it gets to be a little bit more flair of the visual, as I call it. Like better looking woods, more purfling and more fret dot. The stuff that's just cosmetic is pretty, but you're not really getting that much more. And once you get about 3K, that's when it starts to split to big manufacturer, high end, and paying somebody to build you one.
Right.
Like beginning luthiers start around 3K, at least in my recent research. And the good news is you could get exactly what you want from a dude that'll build it for you. But the problem is they might not get that experience. You don't know what you're going to get.
Yeah.
There was somebody's dad in my group, in my graduating class, that started building guitars while he was in school, and it was hit or miss with it. It's like some of them were like, that sucks. There's just no nice way to put it. But the counterpoint, that other ones were like, holy cow. Now that's an awesome win. Like if you can spend 3K and get a guitar that sounds like that, score. It was holding its own against the other ones in the class, which was great. So that's where the divergence go. And then you can get up to, like, I think Taylor's top of the line is around 6 or 7. Paul Reed Smith's go for like 9 to 10 for their acoustic guitars, which I don't get that for a steel string. I really don't. I don't know how much.
What about like a Manzer? They're like 20 grand.
Yeah, I know. I was getting there. I was going up the thing. It's like there's a quality, not drop off, but it becomes so much more money for such a small amount of gain that it's like.
So I had an interesting conversation with a great guitar player recently. I won't name a name or whatever, but yeah, we were kind of talking about. Somebody had mentioned something about like the 430. What is it? 432. Like tuning to 432.
Oh yeah, 430. Yeah, whatever that.
Whatever it is, yeah, whatever that number is. But he was mentioning that, quality luthiers actually tune the wood to 440. Mm-hmm. And so if you're off of that, like the wood actually was made to resonate. Yeah. At that pitch. You certainly aren't getting that under 10 grand, I don't think.
No,
probably not. Maybe there's some budding people that are doing that, but I think so. Like to your question of like, well, is it worth it or whatever? At a certain point, I think that once you get, I don't know what the number is. Maybe it's 5. Let's just say 5,000, maybe. And over that, you start to get people that are tinkering with mm-hmm. that kind of thought process. Like, totally. Does this wood resonate? Like, where does that resonate or whatever to find those special things so that when you do get that guitar, it might not look like anything special, but the person that built it was like a master's craftsman, whatever.
It's the Collins guitars. That was I'll tell that story in a second, but to play off of that, when I was visiting a local luthier in Medina, and he was leading me through his shop, we're talking guitars like crazy, because duh, and he was like, well, here's some tone woods, and he's like, let's listen to the difference of it. So he went through and like he pulled out ones that he picked that were really resonant and certain things, and just tapping them, and you can hear it. Like you can hear it before it goes on the instrument. It's really surreal. And then you get the guys that like throw the wood down and with graphite over top of it and run different frequencies through it and see how much activity they can get on the actual thing, and kind of pick the things like that. And to kind of jump off that, when I went to it was actually at Woodsy's in Kent. When I went to Woodsy's in Kent once, and this was probably, 2006, so like 15 years ago. But they had the high-end room.
Yeah.
And, they Breedlove's, Santa Cruz, no Froggy Bottoms. But they had a Collins there, which out of all of them, they had the high-end Martins and Taylors too. But like the Collins looked like it was the not aesthetically pleasing of the bunch. And I was like, that's kind of weird. And I was like, how much is this thing? It was like $4,000 15 years ago. And it's only gone up since then. It's like, that's insane. And then I played a chord on it, and I was like, that's completely worth it. It was just absolutely stunningly responsive and loud and full. And I was just blown away. And that's why I've always I've loved those guitars, because they're kind of that company that's like, yeah, we get that it doesn't look like $1 million, but you ain't playing it for the looks. You know,
Right.
unless you're Prince or
Do you ever?
something.
That reminds me of the Manzer one. Because if you ever look up people who actually have bought these things, and you usually have to wait a couple years, I think, once you order
Yeah.
one, and then you see some people they get it and they're like, it's not like there's no like fanciness, and then like they're mad about it because they were expecting it to be like the most beautiful looking instrument ever, and it just looks like kind of like a plain guitar, you know. And so they're just like, why would anybody pay? You know, it doesn't have like the fancy border. Like there's not even a crazy inlay or anything. You know, like they're kind of going through the
Yeah.
whole.
Yeah.
I'm like, wow, you didn't do any research when you bought that. You just said,
Exactly. You just wanted to throw a lot of money at a guitar.
I heard that's the best, so I put yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the catch all right there. It's a matter of like what reputation is built into it. Like I watched the TED talk by Paul Reed Smith talking about how he builds his guitar.
Yeah.
And one of the great things he said is like you're never going to put in like he's like with any guitar you have, you're never going to put in a 5 and get a 5 out of it in terms of volume. He's like, that's not the way. Guitars are the dying instrument. My words, not his. Like every note that you play is always going down. You're never going to be able to get louder. You know, with the violin, you got the bow and so on. So he's like, our goal as luthiers is to make sure that you get as close to that 5 as humanly possible. So that if somebody puts in a 5, they get out a 4.8 or a 4.9. It's
Right.
impossible to get the 5, but you get as close as you can. And did some really cool stuff with like dropping different nut materials down, and you could hear different ones ringing better. Even though it's through a sound system, he's like, you know, this is a graphite one, this is a tusk, this is a bone, and this is this. And he's like, we go with the at that time, it was like, we go with the graphite because listen to that. Ding! You know, it's just really, oh yeah, it's a good call. You know, so it's the intricacies, I think, is what you pay for at the higher end, which kind of makes sense. You know, all that knowledge and tinkering, especially a guy like him who's been doing it for 30, 40 years, and particularly in electric. That's why I was skeptical about his acoustics. You know, it's like, I get the electric thing because that's his thing, but like 10,000 for an acoustic from an electric guy, call me elitist, which
I mean, Paul knows who buys his guitars, and they're not guitar players. Not that because they're amazing guitars, but most like they're expensive guitars. The ones he makes the most money on are not being bought by players. They're being bought by people who like very pretty things, and he can call it private stock or super private stock, and all of a sudden $20,000. Somebody will buy it. Like
20,000 would be cheap. I mean, those dragons go for 30 to 50.
Sure, yeah, and he knows that. I think he knows that.
Don't get me wrong. And if somebody was like, "I'll buy you one," I'll take it.
Yeah, right. Of course.
You know, I'm gonna play the hell out of this. I'm not gonna just set it out to be pretty. I'm gonna use this thing.
I've always thought if I ever had like a 10,000, you know, whatever, $20,000, somebody gave me that, or like I want to play it till it breaks. I want it to just one day it's just gonna turn into like a powder because I played it like I actually put enough effort into playing it that I got the $20,000 worth out of it.
Oh,
because
totally.
anything less than that, then I feel like I'm like not getting my money's worth out of it in a way.
Yeah, no,
and not because it's a crappy instrument, but I just try to say like if I'm gonna spend 20 grand on an instrument, I better put like 100,000 hours on it, you know?
Yeah, and I think that's the other thing too. Is just like, why would you pay that much? I get the collector's market mentality, but as a player, I was just like, I couldn't do that. I could like never do that. Be like, oh yeah, I'm going to spend this much to collect this guitar and never touch it. It's like, how about no? How about I'm going to use the hell out of it? Of course, now I'm looking at it like I do have a vintage, like this is a vintage guitar, which makes me feel really freaking old, you know, because I bought it in '94, which I'd never think it was going to be like, what was that? Where are we sitting at? Almost 30 years. So it's like, really? That's crazy to me.
So, you know, in '94, have you ever thought about this? Hendrix would have, the time of Hendrix before he died, like, so when he died, I think it was at 1971, 72, something like that. I might be wrong. Maybe it was 70. Anyway, let's say it's 70 just to be safe. That would be 24 years from 1994. Do you know that it's been longer since now to that? That's been 28 years or something, 27 years. So when we were in the early 90s, that gap between us and like Hendrix and like Zeppelin and the Beatles and stuff was less than it is now from us to like Nirvana.
That's crazy. I remember joking around when we first heard Metallica on the radio, like my brother and I, and be like, someday this is going to be on the oldies station. How weird will that be? And now it's true. It's like the stuff off of the Black album is all over the place on the older quote unquote stuff.
Yeah, that's 30 years old now.
That's insane.
Which is again older than Hendrix was at the time when we were, in middle school, high school, whatever.
Which, and the technological leaps and everything else, it's crazy. But yeah, that's nuts. I love the high end guitars. Like I've seen some Paul Reed Smith's private stocks that were like, yeah, I would totally drop that money if I could.
Yeah, right.
Like totally, because they had one that was like a lefty 7-string fan fret single cutaway thing that was just like, whoa, who the hell bought that and how do I become their friend?
Yeah, right.
Type of thing. And it's like that is just gorgeous and really stinking cool. And clearly if it's a private stock, he's like, yeah, I want the whole thing up front, especially since it's lefty, and that's it. Maybe we can dive into that a little bit of a rant. The manufacturing for lefties now compared to where it was when we were in high school is hugely different. Like you can just about get almost anything left-handed. Now, there's an asterisk on that with like the exception of Strandbergs. They don't do those lefty runs anymore. And those things, every time I see those show up on Reverb, it's like gone with power.
Basically any of the like headless lefty things aside from Kiesel.
And I think Manning,
practically hard to get it. It's practically impossible.
Like the one that starts with an M, the Polish guys.
Can you get those?
Yeah. I was this close to getting one. It was a lefty 7-string, brand new. It was like $2,500, so that's why I didn't. I'm like,
so like I'm on a few of the like Facebook groups with left-handed extended whatever, and then there'll be some run. There'll be some run, and they've had those over the years. But a lot of the ones that people are like, well, I'd like to do that again, and then I swear it seems like every couple months there's a letter from one of the manufacturers, and they're like, we're not doing lefties anymore. Mm-hmm. Like too many people like put money down and then they bailed, and then or they didn't pay. So I guess most of them are giving up at this point. And even like Paul Reed Smith is like, he doesn't seem to like making lefties.
They still got their lower end CE or SE customs, and I don't even want to say that's too much lower end because I've heard nothing but really good things about them in terms of value. They're like, for what you get, the money you pay, it's a great guitar, which says a lot about Paul Smith's control.
Yeah, they're made in the same place as the Schecters and ESPs, I think, which now those imports are all like really high end. Like they're nice guitars. Maybe not high end, but they're really nice guitars, especially for the money. That $1,000 range or whatever.
Exactly. So go back onto that price point. Like for the $1,000 range, I would immediately tell somebody, grab a Schecter, grab an Ibanez, grab a PRS. You can get it in that price range.
Like this guitar I was playing the other night. Yeah, great guitar.
Yep. It's got a multi-piece neck. Like for under $1,000, that's really freaking good.
Just like the construction's nice, and like I said, I might be nicer than the Carvin I have, I think, which was a lot more money than that. Mm-hmm. So,
how long before the Schecter did you have the Carvin?
Well, the Carvin is from 2000.
Okay.
And I think I've had the Schecter 5 years, maybe.
Okay. So it was a long.
And actually, the Carvin's gotten better. Like over time, it gets better.
Now, you just did a bunch of work on your Carvin.
Yeah, the Carvin. The pickups were sounding kind of wimpy, and not the good kind of way. Because I like low output pickups in general. Mm-hmm.
Your video went out, but I can still hear you.
Oh.
I think. Yeah, I can hear you.
It's like my USB went out or something.
Oh, that's weird.
Huh.
Well, At least I can. This has been like, what? Is it, you had the bad gig technical problems, the technical problems with the Helix beforehand, and then the audio problems before we started the podcast, and now you disappeared down the video USB problem.
Okay.
Thing.
Does
Yeah,
it
you're back.
sound the same and everything's?
Yeah, everything's
Okay.
the same. That was
All
strange.
right, that is weird. Yeah. So the Carvin. So I decided I was gonna. I just changed out all the wiring inside. So I took all the old. They kind of use this really thin wiring there. It wasn't really very good wire. So I got like kind of the vintage cloth wire or whatever. It's a little bit like bigger gauge wire too. And I rewired it, made shorter runs and cleaner. It was all cleaner. Like everything was more clean. Changed the capacitors and stuff, and it made a nice improvement on that guitar. It actually fixed the pots. They were kind of being weird, and so just one of those things. Apparently, you can't just play guitar, especially electric guitar. You got to be good at like fixing everything.
And that kind of like segues us into our whole other discussion that we wanted to talk about with guitar repairs and what every guitar player should know from like, I'd say like within the first year of playing, things that everybody should be familiar with in terms of their guitar. And obviously, like the first thing that comes to mind is changing your strings.
Yeah.
Like it seems so rudimentary, especially since I'm teaching. But I remember I was subbing for somebody at a pretty big music school here, and like this kid came in, and the strings were like, the almost black, not completely black, but just like totally rusted out and everything else. And I'm like, dude, you gotta. And he was playing on a PRS, not like the high end custom. Right. On one of the better SEs. I'm like, dude, you got to change your strings. And he's like, oh, I'll just take it in the shop and have them do it. I'm like, you don't know how to change your strings? And then he said, I will never forget what this kid said to me, because it took every ounce of me not to just slap him in the face. But he's like, yeah, I don't do all that type of stuff. I'm a player, man, not a tech guy. And I was just like, psh, you moron. It's like saying I don't fill my car with gas because I'm a driver. It's like, this is par for the course. Everybody does this. You got to know how to change your strings. That's just Guitar 101. Here it is. Here's how they're tuned. This is how you put new ones on to make sure that it's going well. I had another kid at another place whose strings were literally black from the amount of dirt. I asked him when was the last time he changed his strings, and it was 3.5 years.
I probably have a few guitars like that.
Yeah, but this kid played it. Like, this can't be. So I'm like, buy new strings. I will restring this string for you. And I did. And he's like, holy cow, it sounds so much better. I'm like, yeah, your pickups were basically getting rust in them from these things. What do you expect? And so outside of strings and restringing, basic things, what do you think?
It's a good question. So, I mean, maybe those people are smart to not learn how to do all this stuff. But I think, like, yeah, if you ever wanted to be like a gigging guitarist or whatever, like, you're going to save a lot of money if you learn how to do a few things. Changing the strings is one of them. And then all the kind of things, like, some people, you find that they don't realize they can mostly change the action on the guitar. Mm-hmm. And every guitar is a little different. Like this guitar, without getting the truss rod thing yet, you can change the height of this bridge by changing these screw things. Other guitars, like you need a little wrench or whatever, and you can change the height of that. Yeah. So, I remember seeing a thing with Stanley Jordan. If you're not familiar with, are you familiar with Stanley?
Yeah.
Yeah. So he does two-hand tapping stuff, and he was talking about in his video. He's very picky, but he's like, just like 1/4 turn on the the bridge or whatever to lower it just this much can like completely change the way the guitar feels for him. And I think there's some truth to that.
Oh, totally. I mean, we're dealing with like watching that repair channel on YouTube. He's dealing with like thousandths of an inch all the time, and it's like that makes a significant difference in the playing. He's like, I just lowered this from like seventh. What is this thing? He's like, yeah, this was 7/64 on the bass string, and I brought it down to 5/64. And he's like, that's a definite, much more comfortable guitar. And I knew that those adjustments made that much of a difference, but like to hear him talk, the way that he talked about it consistently, about how we're dealing with fractions of a fraction of an inch in terms of adjustments on anything, totally changes how well the guitar plays.
Yeah, it's a balance though, right? Because the lower your action, you do lose something, I think, in the tone side of things.
Oh, of course. I mean,
it doesn't. It's not quite as loud and maybe not as resonant, but you don't fret out on notes as much. It's kind of like you have to find that balance that's good for you.
And that's a very personal thing to an extent.
Sure.
I mean, of course, I haven't found anybody that's like, I love the action as high as it'll go. Like, I have never seen somebody.
Well,
I've
seen. I don't know how much they
like
say they like it, maybe, but.
Like I can get it for slide guitar, it makes sense, but for like anything fretted wise, you don't want a high action. There's just no way. So
that reminds me of Danny Gatton, though. So you know Danny Gatton. So like his action, I mean, I don't know how high it was, but it was not low.
Okay.
And he was like, because it just doesn't sound good when I put it too low.
There you go.
He said, I wish it was lower. It'd be way easier to play.
Yeah. And he was an incredible player. So
unreal, yeah.
Argue with that. If he's complaining, but he's doing that, shut up and just play your guitar.
Right.
And there's always a trade-off with that, with the particularly with resonance and with in volume versus playability. On electric guitars, I'm more of and maybe this is because I don't play electric as my primary instrument. I'm more of a get it as low as it can go. Like, just make it easy to play. I don't really care too much. And this one is actually, the Taylor that I have here is ridiculously low for an acoustic guitar. Like, it plays as good as my electric, if not better. And there's 13. It's like but it's so easy to play. My nylon strings, though, are significantly higher than this. But that's also, like, I don't play those plugged in at all. So
I was telling you that at my Ramirez, I was like, it's really good to play it. It's and I can get it to sound pretty good most of the time, but you definitely, like, especially in the higher frets, it's a lot easier to, like, not quite get the note down. You don't get anything for free on it.
Yeah.
So you
kind of telling me that about Parker Flies too. They're like, it's a very unforgiving instrument. They're easy to play, but they're not one to cover your mistakes. Maybe that's more of a Pizio thing than the Parker Fly itself. Because I had a Night Fly way back and flipped the strings. Yeah.
That's the guitar. I always wanted a Parker Fly, and they never made them lefty.
Those are pretty stinking cool. They're still being made. They're just not being sold in the States anymore.
Yeah, I don't think they're not being made by Ken Parker either.
So. Oh, okay. So, either way, those were really cool when they first came out. Way ahead of their time.
Yeah, it's kind of he did the Fender thing where he sold it to Fender, I think, and then they they changed the brand and whatever.
Yeah, that's too bad.
Man, he makes some fascinating guitars now. Have you heard about? He basically. I've heard from various people that he's like solved the archtop thing, and you can use bronze strings on it too. And they came up with a new pickup that'll work for it. And the guitar like almost looks like, we'll have to find a picture, but it doesn't look like it would work in a way. Like it's this very interesting shape, but it like apparently it's super resonant. This is like probably a $30,000 guitar.
I just looked one up, and one of them is going for $20,000.
Yeah, they're expensive.
That was a 1991 move. The other ones are around the $2,000 mark. That's not bad.
Yeah, so
all arch tops. Yep.
Yeah, they're beautiful, stunning. So he's still innovating and like coming up with cool new gadgets.
You still got the same headstock too. That's strange.
Oh, I love that headstock too.
It just looks so out of place on an arch top. It still looks cool, but it's like I wouldn't. But that's the whole cliche parts of a guitar.
I've never cared too much about headstocks. It's funny. I'm really kind of partial. I think it's because the first guitar I ever played was 4 and 2, the Gretsch Corvette. So I've always really liked that. What's that?
Did your Brian Moore have 4 and 2? I think that's.
And the Brian Moore is a 4 and 2. And then this was Ironically, it's right here. This is the first guitar I ever played, which is this Gretsch Corvette. It's like a 60s Gretsch Corvette. It was my dad's.
Oh, nice.
But yeah, 4 and 2, you'll see.
Yep.
What's funny, this is a righty, right? But I always played it lefty. And what's funny is the Brian Moore has the 4 on the top. Like, this is the opposite of this one.
Huh.
Which is cool, which is what I would pick. Like, if I ever had the Timmer signature, it would totally be like 4 and 2. Just because, I don't know.
I like it. I like the standard acoustic layout, and obviously the classical one. And like the Fender headstock is okay. I cannot stand the reverse headstock, though. That
really?
just drives me visually crazy. I don't want to say it's growing on me, but half of me is wondering if that extra scale length and string tension for the low E is great for drop tunings. Like, that has to really kind of help a little bit. I'm guessing that...
I don't know. Yeah, I've always wondered about that, too. You would think it would make a thing. I guess I don't have any guitars with reverse headstocks. It's kind of... I don't really think about it too much. You know, I don't really like the real pointy headstocks. That's my
Explorer type of thing. Yeah,
I don't. The Explore. You mean the triangle one? I don't mind that so much because it's sort of classic. I mean the like pointy, like shredder, like poke your eye out.
The ESP or the Jacksons.
Yeah. I'm not crazy about that. Look.
Yeah. I really like the headless. To me personally, I think they're great. You know, I really like that type of setup. I think it's a cool little innovation as well, just to kind of like move it. I mean, we're getting off topic from the repair thing, so
that's all right.
Bring that. Yeah, we can bring it back around. But like I like that moving forward of guitar technology, because the Steinberger did it like way back, and it was a fad for a while. You know, but as good as Holdsworth was, it wasn't like breaking into like the mainstream where everybody had to have one.
Yeah, I mean, you see him in those like those 80s videos for a while there, right? It seemed like a lot of people had those.
And then that died off, and now I think when Strandberg brought it back, it really, really got a lot more of a foothold.
You know what happened though is there was a patent on it. That's why no one ever made them. So when that patent expired on the pieces, that's when you started seeing everyone start making. That's when Kiesel started doing it, and Strandberg, and everybody else started doing it because those patents ran out.
That makes financial sense. It's like, oh, okay, I can do it that way. You know,
and then
an open source guitar design. So,
you ever seen the Trans Trem? I know we're way off topic now. The one that actually like transposes when you.
Yeah, Michael Hedges has used it on.
Man, that's so cool.
That is. There's a new kid that's doing that now. That Alex Mishnikov or whatever.
Oh, Makacek?
The lefty slappy tappy kid.
Oh no, never mind. Different person.
He's I'm gonna butcher his name.
I thought you were gonna say Makacek, which he plays Strandberg. That's what I was.
No, this is an acoustic kid. It's a George Michael Careless Whisper thing. He's got the band tuners on it.
Let's not put that on.
Yeah. Let's Careless Whisper. Let's see. Where is it? Yeah. Who is this? Alexander Misko. So he's got like the Bander tuners on it. He's got, and then he's in that video. He's got the Bander tuners.
You mean like the G benders and stuff? Those things?
No, this is it's a literal banjo tuner.
Oh, banjo tuner. Okay, sorry.
Semi-locking thing that it's open until you tune it to pitch, and then you lock it, and it gives you a half step of motion whenever you click it or turn it. And he's got them all on the headstock, which I mean, those aren't cheap. Those are like $200 a pop for those things. The last time I checked the price, which was probably about 6 months ago, because always shopping for gear. And then like he just had a video of his like new prototype guitar, and it's got like the tailpiece, like your Eastman, but it's got like switches on it, kind of like the Man Ring thing with the hip shots. So he's got it down here and on the headstock.
So that sounds like a lot of work, though. That's like a bunch of little switches.
Yeah.
Except where the Trans Trem's just like play any chord and then.
Yep. Exactly. Yep. That's exactly what Hedges was doing with it. There's some cool tracks on that used it, but he also had it on an electric harp guitar to tell you how out there where out there it was. You had an electric harp guitar with a trans trem on it. It's like, what else do you need?
Right, of course.
You need that to fall asleep when you're driving. So dark humor on that one. But he that was a really, really cool setup. Really cool setup. And now this other kid's doing that type of thing, and it's like, oh, that's kind of impressive. So that's very nice with that setup. And then back to repairs real quick. So obviously lowering the action is one thing. And I think a lot of people get scared with messing with that part of the guitar. And I find my level of fear in terms of messing with a guitar has everything to do with how much I paid for it.
Yeah, so I mean, as far as these things though, so maybe a slight backstory, how I even got into any of these repairs. And I say this because I used to help Adam with some of his things back in the day, and other people too, all kinds of people. But the reason was when I was 19, I moved to New York City, and then I worked in this music store, and I played a lot, but I really didn't know anything about like setting guitars up or anything. I had been playing for 10 years, but like I didn't really have a teacher so much, and like, I mean, I kind of did, but it was never about like, I was good enough by the time I had a teacher that we never talked about like, is the action low or anything like that. Like, kind of like past that stage because I was playing well enough. So I never knew even how to get low action or anything. Just kind of like went with the winds. Sometimes the guitar was buzzy and sometimes it was really hard to play. And, but some notes came out and some notes didn't, and just kind of bared with it. I could change strings though. But anyway, I went and I worked at this music store, and the one guy there was really good at doing all these setups, and people would bring their guitars in and do setups, so he taught me how to do a lot of it, or all of it really. So we started getting really good at like, well, how low can you go and how straight can you get the neck? And I got to try on hundreds and hundreds of guitars, including my own, So these kind of things, like changing the height of this, or there's not much you can do to mess your guitar up. You could lose some screws. You might break your string if it's on there because you went too high or something. But you're really not going to do any like real damage to your instrument. At least I've never seen anyone do it. Like, what's the worst you could do if you go too low or too high? Like, it's not going to really do anything. You could put this in the wrong place and the pitch is off, but like that, you just move it to the right place. This piece will move kind of like a violin.
Yeah.
That's great. So you could get your intonation or whatever. But anyway, the part that people get scared about is the truss rod.
Yep.
So if you're not familiar, there's a metal rod that goes through the neck to really just deal with weather changes. So when it gets dry out, the wood kind of shrinks. When it gets more humid out, the wood kind of gets bigger. And that'll actually make the neck either go this way or this way. Mm-hmm. So there's a metal rod that goes through, and it'll straighten the neck out for you, or help you straighten the neck out. But the reason that people get scared about it is you can over crank it, or you can unscrew it all.
Yep.
So if you keep unscrewing, it gets real loose. The thing is though, like, if you're cranking it and it gets really hard to turn, like, stop cranking it.
Yeah, it's a time to stop.
Even if it doesn't get to the place where you want it to, you just, maybe sometimes you have to deal with it. Because especially, like, depending on what the wood of the neck is, you might still have a bit of a bow or whatever as you're tightening it. And the same with loosening it. Like, if it gets so loose that it just feels like it's flimsy on there, it's like any screw. It's really just like a little nut or whatever that's on there. If you were doing that on a regular screw and it started to get loose, you would know, oh, okay, I'm getting close to the end because it's not, the whole piece isn't on there anymore. Same deal. So if you got to that point, just stop. The other thing, so when you're tight, so when you have a bow and you tighten it, it'll actually come to shape pretty quick. Like, you can kind of see it really quick. But if it's a back bow where it's like hitting the strings in the middle, sometimes it takes like a day or so for that to settle.
Mm-hmm.
So if you loosen it too much, you come back the next day and then you have a bow kind of thing, and you sort of just have to play with it. But it's really easy to do, and you usually don't have to turn it that much.
Yeah, everything that I've seen in videos, like maybe an eighth to a quarter of a turn. That's it. And then you gotta let it settle for a bit and see what happens. And by settle, it means like 20 minutes to an hour, let it do its thing. And I'm guessing on the outside with an hour. I mean, probably depending on the weather or whatever else, you could even take a day and let it just sit off the side and see what happens. And that's the other thing too. Again, pulling from all these videos, is letting it take the time to adjust will let you see what you really did. But if you're expecting instant results, especially with wood, you're always going to play against something that's going to be changing by the time you actually get to it, and get to playing it. And like this guy, this Tom Woods, I think is his name. He's in Ontario, Canada, but like he does tons of neck reset, like major work that I'm looking at, like, just buy another guitar. He'll take these like 1930s off-brand that were big at the time, but they're not Gibson or Fender or Martin, so who cares? Now they're not, just because they're vintage doesn't mean that they're worth a lot of money. They have to have a certain name on them, and it's like he'll get guys sending them to him to do like a full workout. And he'll take the backs off, and you look at it and it's like, oh my Lord, that is a mess in there. And most of the messes are done from extra guys trying to repair it.
Oh, sure. Go on. Yeah, so that's kind of other things too, like if you broke a tuner or something, I mean, it's really just a screw on here. So you got to find another one, you unscrew it, you put a new one in. So I feel like those kind of repairs should just be sort of natural. You just do what you got to do. The other side of things, though, if you're gigging an electrical guitarist, I have a hard time believing that you don't have to learn how to solder at some point. At least for me, it seems like I'm always fixing stuff. Like I know, like on the Carbon 7, which is upstairs, I think, the input jack, the way that they made it, like always gets loose. Like the way that the style that they used, and so many times, and that means inside it gets loose, and there's there's a wire on it or something, and that wire keeps doing that, and eventually it falls off.
Yep.
So then I'm like, well, I guess every time that happens, I could go take it to a repair shop, and then they'll solder that back. But so the reason I got into soldering originally, which was pretty early on, was for something like that. I was like, gosh, I gotta fix this stupid thing. And I had no idea what I was doing. I just kind of figured it out.
Yeah.
Just watch a YouTube video. I don't think YouTube was out when I first, well, if it was, it probably wasn't around to watch YouTube when I first started soldering. So you just kind of tinker. But now you could easily watch a YouTube video that's probably 5 minutes and make you a better solderer than I am. But then eventually, like you might want to buy like new pickups or something. Like I actually just put a new pickup in here. Was it yesterday or the day before?
Yeah,
because I never liked it. Which these guitars, a pain in the butt to change stuff like that.
How did you get into that? Like
exactly.
F-holes?
Yeah, maybe we could talk about. Yeah, you have to use the F-holes. I almost made like a rookie mistake too. Well, to do it the right way, you would take all the electronics off, I think, and then redo everything. But I almost did it too, where I almost unscrewed this. I actually unscrewed it, and I was gonna pull it through, and then I thought to myself, because I've never done a hollow body like anything. Yeah. I'm like, I don't think I'm gonna be able to get that back in that hole.
It's like, it went through my head. I'm like, getting it back in that hole is gonna be.
I'm not sure I can actually pull that off. Yeah. And unfortunately, the way that they had done these two are like the wires between these are just long enough between these two. So there was no give, because what I was thinking of doing was taking the pickup out and then just taking this guy out, kind of pull him through here, and then desolder the one that was there or whatever.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And so I actually did take these two off when I first did that, which was then a huge pain to put them back in. But what I ended up doing was actually just splitting the wire that was there before and then splicing
Nice.
it. And actually, even to do that, when you take this pickup thing off, I had to go like put that in the hole so I had enough give
Yeah.
to do it. Anyway, it worked out. And I was like,
It worked out.
after I unscrewed these, and I'm like, oh my gosh, what a dumb mistake. But that's just kind of, I'm a tinkerer for sure.
And that's
So,
how you learn.
Yeah, just how you learn.
It's like, I probably shouldn't have done that.
Yeah, I was like, oh man, I was so close. Like I said, I unscrewed this, so all I had to do was just push my finger on it real hard, and it would have popped through. And then I was thinking,
Sketch.
and the other thing too is actually that wouldn't even have helped me because there was a wire that goes to here for the ground.
Yeah, I was gonna say the ground.
So I would have had to like, I don't know what there must be special tools for it. I didn't really look it up. Like
to
special
that guy on YouTube, the
Yeah.
amount of tools he has.
Yeah, there's probably some special tool that lets you like help you get it back to the right spot or whatever. But I don't have those things, and I don't really have that many tools in a lot of ways. I'm just more of a, I have something here that'll work. Actually, it's funny. I use these little tweezers. I don't know if you can see
You
these.
mean like the tweezers that I use for my fingernails?
I don't even know what this was from. I don't remember
There's
now.
super glue in between them.
Actually, I think this is from my soldering iron
Nice.
kit that I had. But I actually used that to like go in here and pick stuff out
Yeah, careful, don't you drop that in there.
because some of the other wrenches I had were just a little too big for these holes. And this isn't so like if I miss, it doesn't like poke a hole in the guitar.
hmm
So yeah, I just like I had this around, so I used it. So yeah, then but this is kind of a hard guitar to do it in. Other guitars, yeah, you end up changing pickups out, changing pots, resoldering because something got loose. And this isn't even getting into like amps. Like that's a whole nother.
Oh yeah, that's a whole other huge field in terms of repair.
The Mesa, I broke off a couple knobs because I had it in my car and like I moved or something and it knocked some of the knobs off. And it actually broke them at the stem, so I had to change the pots out. And that was interesting. But, just the soldering iron thing really helps on those kind of things. You just kind of look how it was done before and then redo it.
So I think, in conclusion, with like what things a guitar player should know within the first year, clearly changing the strings, and maybe some slight action adjustments. Oh, you can keep an acoustic guitar humidified.
Really? I never did.
I mean, you're getting lucky. I mean, this guy, you can't see it anymore because I got it fixed. Well, maybe you can. See the crack by the bridge?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. That was the rookie mistake of, I can leave it in my car in the winter. It'll be fine. I mean, I've done it countless times before. So I left it in my car for the winter, and then I brought it in the house, and I just left it there. It's like, whatever. Then I opened it up to a nice big crack. I mean, that happened in one fell swoop. Whoop! All the way down. It's glued now. It ain't going anywhere. But I took it in the repair guy, and he's like, "Yeah, you didn't humidify it."
Yeah,
I'm like,
I remember seeing those too. I guess I don't have. Well, most of my guitars are never in cases, like ever.
Well, you have how many acoustics? One.
I have 3, kind of. There's 2 really crappy ones.
Okay.
And then the Ramirez.
Honestly, the really crappy ones can take a hell of a beating. They're generally not like solid wood throughout, so it's like plywood doesn't crack that much unless you put huge amounts of effort into it.
Maybe.
Because I mean, there's no wood grain seam for it to run down. Most of the cracks happen because of the weather, but it's also like it's going to happen in a seam somewhere in the wood. It's usually, which I mean, clearly the most obvious one is right in the middle because that's just where it is at. But anywhere else where you can follow the wood grain, that's what a crack does. It's like, oh, look at this wonderful wood grain. It would be a shame if somebody cracked it, and it just goes, and whichever. And even like this, when I first got it done, I took it to that same luthier that gave me the tour of his shop and did all the tone woods, and he looked at it. He's like, "It's just cosmetic." He's like, "It looks bad, but it ain't. It's done. It's not gonna get any worse." And so I let it go for another 10 years. I still humidified it, but it just had a crack. Whatever.
Sure.
And then past year, I finally decided, you know what? I'm just going to get that fixed and get it all fixed up so that it holds together. Because I noticed that it started to split after the bridge.
Oh, interesting.
And I was like, yeah, I should probably deal with that.
So how'd they
And
fix it?
glue and wood dust.
Oh, okay.
It didn't do anything with the bracing or anything underneath. So it was basically like, you put the wood dust in, you'd put a super glue on it with tape on the side so it doesn't like run into the top. And that's pretty much it. Like the guy that was doing the repair videos, he gets really elaborate. And he's like, sometimes you can't even tell you I've done the repair. Sometimes. Other times, there's just no way to avoid it. You can't. You're talking about matching paint that's 20 years old, or a shellac that's 20 been in the sun for that. It's just not going to happen. You can get really close, but it looks like there's just like a darker stain in one area. There's no way around it. But he does it like depending on the size. He's like he has like spruce dust and rosewood dust and mahogany dust that he'll just like put in there and then do a dab of super glue, wait till it dries, put more dust in, dabs of super glue, and just kind of like build it that way. And once it's up over the top, he'll take like a razor that he like custom tapes and just scrapes it off and makes it so it's level, and then refinishes it, and it goes from there. It all depends on whether. I think the big difference with crack repair is it structural or is it just cosmetic?
Yeah.
Because some stuff is just cosmetic. It might look bad, but it's fine for the guitar. Other stuff, it's like, no, the guitar is coming apart. That's it. Like when the bridge is pulling up or something like that.
Sure.
My brother just sent me a picture of a guitar. He's like, is this fixable? And it was a classical guitar that somebody tried to string up with steel strings. The bridge was no longer attached. And I'm like, technically, yes, it can be fixed, but just spend $150 and buy another classical.
Yeah, right.
That's not worth you're going to spend $700 getting the thing fixed, because I fixed a raised bridge on another classical that I had, and that was like $50. Because he was like, oh yeah, it's not pulling. He's like, it's just barely raising. We'll just throw some hide glue underneath it, clamp it shut, wait a day, you'll be fine. It was like $50 turn around and whatever. It didn't matter. But like all the way off with like wood splinters and stuff like that, it's like, yeah, no, that's going to be a lot more work. Plus, you need to put it exactly where it was.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you're throwing off the intonation and everything else of the guitar. So it was like there's a lot of whoopsies, this is no longer usable, as if it was in a usable state, but you can make it a hell of a lot worse.
I had a Carvin Acoustic. It got stolen, actually, so that's why I don't have it anymore. But the top, though, was like the whole top, like, bubbled up a bit. Actually, I bought it used, and that already had been like that, and I never gave it back. And I don't know if I just didn't really notice it at first, and by the time I just thought maybe the setup wasn't very good and I was going to get to it kind of thing. Yeah. But then eventually, like, once you got the neck straight or whatever, the strings would still be like this high, or whatever. And when you looked, there was the way the neck was coming in, it was coming in at this like angle that made it impossible. So the strings would come up, and there's like no way to get the action lower.
That's why he does a ton of neck resets. I've watched a lot. I can't do it, but
I guess I don't think it was the neck that was off. I think what happened, because I was reading about it, is sometimes the tops will actually like kind of curve on top.
It sounds like it's coming away from its bracing.
Yeah, like it like swells. So I guess what happens sometimes, it just gets too humid at some point, and then it like deforms and.
Yeah. By the way, I'm just going to interject this. When it comes to buying your guitars, the humidifier does two things. It humidifies and it keeps it at a constant state. So it's not like it's going to overly humidify your guitar. The control thing. You want around 50% all the time. That's great. It's like I'm less worried about humidifying my guitar in the summer than I am during the winter, especially since it gets so cold here. But at the same time, if it's a really wet summer, I keep the humidifier in it just to make sure that it's soaking up any of the outside stuff.
You're talking about those like little like rubbery ones?
Yeah, no? Just the Oasis ones with the chiclets in the middle. the thing that
I think where we live now, like at least compared to Erie and Buffalo, it's a little bit more friendly here. Like I do notice the swings. It gets drier in the winter and it's more humid in the summer.
I think like the past 2 weeks were the driest that it's ever been, though. Like when it dropped below 32 for like that week there,
Yeah.
it got cold.
Oh yeah, it got super dry because it was just so cold. But I didn't like my guitars. Basically, didn't change the last week or two. They did change originally back in like November-ish time, and I've adjusted them as I played them. But and then like somewhere around like May or something, it seems like I have to do another main adjustment. But it's not too bad. I feel like though when I was in Erie, it was like all the time.
Yeah.
Like it was a mess. Or
Like
like
that.
in New York City too when I was there. Like always
When I was in
changing
Buffalo,
it.
it was every 6 months. Basically, I did it in September and in the May area, like somewhere in there. It would be like, boom, okay, or not May. Whenever the weather stopped. Well, if it stopped snowing in Buffalo, it's probably June. But you know what I mean. It's just the way that it is. Whenever the seasons were definitively into the next thing is when I would take it in to get a setup. There was a guy that was the father of the shop that I shop. I would always go to Jackson Music, and the guy, I don't know if he owned it, and his son. No, I think his son started the music store, and he was just doing repairs. But I would always go to him for the repairs. And that's why I still want that Paul Reed Smith lefty whale blue, because I bought a right-handed Paul Reed Smith like before Paul Reed Smith was actually its thing, and it had him set it up, and it was a great setup. It was a great guitar, and I'm still kicking myself. 30 years down the line.
Oh, so that was a righty. I didn't realize that.
Righty. And I mean, the double cutaway on it with the horns was pretty high up. Like it was around the 20th fret, so it didn't really bug me at all. It was a little annoying. The shorter horn, like digging into my sternum. It was kind of.
What guitar did you start on? I don't think I've ever asked you that.
It was an acoustic. I want to say it was a Fender, but I don't really remember. Like it was my brother was playing, and then the guy that we both worked for at the time, we worked for a campground. He had an extra guitar laying around, and like he was coming over to show my brother how to do some stuff, and we were all kind of hanging out. And then he was like, "Oh, I got another guitar. You like it that way? I'll just flip the strings for you." So he like did a lefty thing on it, and so I started playing it that way because I was like, I'm more comfortable this way. In retrospect, I don't know if I would have stuck with it had he not changed the strings just because it was so awesome to go the other way. So maybe it's his fault that I'm like this. But regardless.
Think how rich you would be. Yeah.
Yeah. I started on that, and then like my first electric was like this Chinese knockoff Les Paul, because I was in love with Les Pauls and Zeppelin, and it was a right-handed one that I flipped the strings on. I just didn't care and did that. I didn't even have an amp. I just ran it through my stereo. It's like this. It's my parents' stereo that I wasn't even sure if it could do the thing, like handle it. It didn't matter. I just needed something to play through. And then we started out with those little, $40 battery-powered 9-volt practice amps that looked like a Marshall stack. Me and my cousin in the same house, just walking around playing our guitars, drove everybody crazy. And I got my first big amp, Fender Ultra Chorus. That's what it was. It wasn't a Super Chorus, Ultra Chorus, even better than Super. So I remember drooling over that thing for months, and my parents got it for me for Christmas. It was pretty stinking. That was. And then I can't remember. I think I had a lefty Ibanez RG 570, and then let's see, from there, I mean, I know I had a Fender Strat, like a Fender.
Wait, you had a lefty 5G or RG 570, the Japanese one?
Yeah, it was a black one. It had the humbucker, single humbucker with not the low pro edge, but the low pro Floyd trem on it, and I had that. And then I had that Parker. I'm trying to go in order. So it was that, and then I think I got a Fender. I want to say it's the Ultra Strat, but it was like the Super Strat, the one that came with the lace sensors that were like the hot stuff at the time.
Yeah.
Rolling nut and everything else. I bought that, flipped it lefty. Had that for a while, flipped it back. Bought a Parker Nightfly. Same idea. Redid the nut. Got it lefty, and then put it back. Bought the Paul Reed Smith. Kept that for a good amount of time, and then I got at Dream Theater, started doing the 7-string stuff. And I was like, oh, I got to get a 7-string. So, found an Ibanez at 7-string and flipped that, and that was my main guitar for a while. And that about the same time I got this Taylor. Or no, I got the Taylor before I got the 7-string. And then the 7-string was my prime electric for a long time. And then I just gave that away.
And that was it was a righty too?
Yeah, that was a righty too.
Man, there's the knobs just drive you. I don't miss that at all. The knobs.
I don't miss the knobs at all. No.
When you're playing them upside down, the knobs are always under your elbow.
Yep. Where did I fall? Damn it! You
and you like roll the thing off, and then you'd always have these marks all over your arms.
Yeah, the volume, the little divots in the volume.
Oh yeah, that sucked.
And then the drum systems were always a pain in the butt because
you couldn't find lefties for anything. Like
yep, back in my day, didn't exist. So I mean, they exist, and then that's why I got the Taylor because I was looking at Taylors and Martins. I hadn't known about Breedlove at the time, but would have done them. But I didn't know. I haven't even heard of them. It was like I went in and I was going to order one, and they were like, "Well, you can get like a Taylor, and they don't upcharge for a lefty, or a Martin, which charges 10%."
Yeah.
It's like Taylor, forget that. I'm not giving you an extra 10% if I'm already spending like $2,000. No, I paid like $1,500 for this, which in retrospect is crazy because the same model now goes for like $5,500, which is like
sure. Its prices went up a lot. Yeah.
It's either inflation or just whatever, the prices just went crazy. But that was probably more the prices just went crazy. You can still get a Les Paul for $15,000 to $2,000, and that's what they were going for when I was there growing up.
I don't know. Standard, not really.
Standards are cheaper, but like the ones nowadays.
No, standards are $3,000 at least.
Really?
Yeah.
I'll loop on that.
You can get the studios.
Maybe I'm thinking the studios.
There's more like the traditional. I think is about $2,000, maybe $2,500.
That's my dream guitar at the time was a Les Paul Studio that was all black with the gold pickups covers.
Oh, nice.
That was the 60s. And that pretty much sums up all of that. I got rid of the Carvin, not the Carvin. The Ibanez is 7-string, and the 6-string I gave to somebody to like redo the paint on, but never got bothered to get it back. It was a girl I was kind of interested in, so it was like, oh yeah, sure, paint this. This will keep us talking to each other. And then I just moved and fell out of interest and whatever else. And then the green machine that I have here, it was something that I built with a buddy of mine, Rich Thulis, who still puts together guitars. He does a phenomenal job. Mm-hmm. And this I've had for 10 years, and it's built like a tank. It's great. It's a great guitar.
I think I remember when you got that, or at least somewhere near then. Yeah.
And everything together, I paid like $800 for it, but it's probably one of the best playing electrics I've ever had, outside of the PRS, for obvious reasons. Oh, I forgot. The creme de la creme guitar that I had was a Satriani JS1 that was signed by him. That it had the Flying in a Blue Dream skull paint job on it.
Nice.
It was, and that I had to have it. Like I went to, there's this place in Rochester, which you've probably heard of, the Rochester House of Guitars, where it's like this.
Maybe, yeah.
It's a 3-story house, a big house, but it's filled with guitars, and it was awesome to go through because they had like the PRS Santana model and everything else like right there, and that was like $7,000 back in the 90s, and like all these crazy out there guitars, Coral sitar guitars, you name it, they had it there. Nothing cool. Left-handed, but of course. Nothing in the same thing. That's just the way it was. But like I saw that guitar and I'm like, I have to have that guitar. I have to, and so I think it was somewhere around like $1,500 to $2,000. I bought it. My parents were so pissed. Still did it, and I'm just like, it's signed by. And luckily, he did the smart thing. He signed the back plate, so I just bought another back plate and took that one up with the signature off, but the real another black, so I could play it because I'm like, I ain't just keeping this thing. I'm going to use it.
Yeah, right.
I'm going to use this thing. Damn it! So that was my main instrument for the longest time.
And that was a righty too, huh?
Yeah, that was a righty too. Yep.
Man.
So, and I traded that guitar for a car. I got a used Mercedes for that guitar, and I should have kept that guitar because at the time it was a great deal and it still was a good trade-off. But I looked up how much those things were worth like 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And they were going for $11,000, $12,000. I was like, damn.
Dum. Yeah, right.
And that wasn't even signed. You know, if it was a signed one, it could have been worth well more than that. So I was like, oh, well, live and learn. You know, and now then I bought that classical, or I had a beater classical, and then I was borrowing somebody's old Martin's classical, and then I ordered the Thames and gave the other one back, and then I had the Thames, my custom electric, my 8th string, which was the newest guitar that I got, and then that Barnett's one that I teach on. So that's my little guitar history of all the instruments that I've gone through.
Nice.
So, and you, what's your guitar history here? I mean, if I'm going to spill my beans on what I've had to buy and restring, you can do the same thing.
All right, we'll do this and then we're going to call it.
All right.
But let's see. So I started with the Gretsch that you see there, which is pretty fortunate. And it was tuned righty. And I guess it's a little backstory there is, like, it wasn't like watching guitar players or something that got me into guitar. We moved to Erie, Pennsylvania when I was 10, and the room that I was attached to actually went up into the attic, and up in the attic was this guitar, because my dad used to play it when we were kids, and he kind of stopped. And I remember thinking like we were never allowed to touch it, but I would like sneak up in the attic when no one was looking and kind of play with it. And I remember like not having any idea how a guitar worked. You know, and I was like kind of doing something like this, and then eventually like I pushed something, and I was like, oh. And then I knew some piano because we took piano lessons.
Yeah.
And I think I was like, you know, something like that. But I got the gist.
That way now with your atonal aficionado.
Yeah, that's right. It fits perfect. But I got the gist of like how it worked, and I might have went like whatever I did. I didn't totally know enough, you know, at the time I was 10 or whatever. But so I played that, and my dad eventually saw me playing it, and then he kind of showed me how to tune. And it's fun. I can't even remember when I switched the strings. My dad must have convinced me to switch the strings over at some point since I was playing lefty. So I just like naturally played it lefty. Mm-hmm. And but at some point I remember buying this acoustic guitar at like a church rummage sale for $25, and it was so bad. It was like
the action was actually
like, I mean, the action was like this, and I don't know if I ever changed the strings on that guitar. So, and I remember specifically bleeding, like this was also the same time I was trying to learn like to play like an F chord. I really remember this too, like, and like really like trying to, and it would never work. And I'm like, this is horrible. Like, I suck. I'm horrible, you know. And I couldn't. It was like I had nothing. I mean, not that it didn't have a little bit to do with me, but
the action does make a huge difference. Huge difference.
So I do remember though. Like at one time, I went with my dad to the store with the Gretsch, and this would have been kind of young. And the guy was like, "Dude, that's a Gretsch Corvette. Holy cow! Like what? Like 67? He's like, that thing's probably worth $5,000, whatever it was."
Yeah.
And I was like, well, crap, I can't keep using this guitar. Yeah. Because I was one of the best things I ever did is when I was like 12, 13, started playing in bands, like making bands like 12, 13 years old. And pretty much been in bands my whole life. And, but it was like, you know, it was kind of like punk rock, alternative, whatever, Nirvana-ish stuff. And it's like, well, I can't keep doing that. Ironically, the other guitar player in the band that I played with was left-handed and played lefty.
Well, that works.
And incidentally, he's starting to play again. We've been reconnecting recently. He was in the army. He just retired.
Nice.
So he's retired.
You know, if you live till you're 40-something, you can retire pretty early.
Yeah, right. So anyway, so he's been picking up guitar again. But so he would let me borrow some of his guitars sometimes. There was a red guitar. I don't even know what it was. Eventually, though, I bought, and I feel like there's a guitar I'm missing here, but I eventually bought this Kramer Focus guitar, the Focus 2000, with a scallop fretboard.
Oh, dang, man.
And it only had a bridge pickup. It was white. It was right-handed. Um, it had a Floyd Rose, like the old Floyd Rose on it. And it only went one way, like a one-way Floyd Rose.
Yeah.
And I had that guitar, and then eventually, I think I was like a senior in high school, and I got a Mexican Strat. At the same time, I also got like maybe a Yamaha Classical. So I started playing some classical. And so then, really, for a while there, the Strat, the Mexican Strat, and that classical were the two guitars I played the most. I almost never played that Kramer because the knobs got in my way. Eventually, though, when I got to New York City, I traded that Kramer for, I want to say maybe that's what got me the Mesa.
Okay.
So like I sold that and got the Mesa head, something like that, or maybe it was the cabinet. Anyway, so I've had that for a while too, and then I had ordered at the time. In 2000 I ordered the Carvin 747 DC 747, and that was my main guitar for the longest time. Up until what, like, I don't know, 7 years ago, maybe 5, 7.
Yeah, you were using that when we met in school.
Yeah, and so I used that. Then during that time, though, I actually got into like fretless and stuff. So I had ordered.
Maybe that Ibanez that you had that was fretless.
Yeah, I have an Ibanez that's fretless, and I have another acoustic that I got that was fretless. Oh, at some point I got an Ovation. I have an Ovation acoustic. I still have it. The tuners all broke. Every single one of them is broke. Like broke. And then it had like a plastic. What are this? What's the? Why am I blanking?
Rosette?
The rosette is plastic, like ripped off. It's actually not that bad of a playing guitar, though. It actually plays really well when it's.
There you go.
So I was thinking recently, I need to get some tuners for that thing. And then what happened after that? So I think the next main guitar I got was the G&L Legacy.
Okay. You still have that.
Yeah,
right?
that's a great guitar. And for a while that's actually had some moments where it was sort of like my main guitar. And I'm always finding like good used deals. So then that was a good used deal. I think it's the USA one, and it's like from '94, and they still have like hand carved the necks and all these kind of things. It's a pretty cool guitar. And after what would have been after that? At some point, I got another Carvin DC 400, which has also been a main guitar a few times. It's a really great playing guitar. It's a little dead sounding in a way, but I took all the electronics out. So the DC 400s, I don't know if they had all these like crazy active electronic EQ thing, whatever. It always sounded crappy to me. So I ripped all that stuff out. What's funny now, it has a bunch of holes. I think it's upstairs. It has a bunch of holes in it, like where the knobs were, but I just took something out. So now it resonates more, all right, yeah. But I only put, I think, 2 knobs in it instead, just to make it a little bit, or maybe like a Strat. I can't even remember now. But it had 4. It was more like a Les Paul.
Yeah.
And then at some point I got a Hagstrom Viking, which is also a pretty cool guitar. I got that. I actually had 2 Sir pedals. I had a Sir Riot and a Sir Jackrabbit. I never really bonded with the Riot, which is their like distortion pedal. But I really did like the Jackrabbit. That's a great tremolo pedal. But anyway, I traded that for the Hagstrom straight up.
Oh, nice.
And now, yeah, I mean, that was a pretty good deal, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Trying to think what else. Oh, then I think not too long after that, I got the Schecter Banshee 7. Oh, I still have a Schecter Hellraiser. So before that, I got a Schecter Hellraiser, which is another guitar I got for like $300. I've had that probably 12 years or so. It's my first shred guitar. Incidentally, the first guitar I ever had that didn't have like medium frets that were smaller. It's the first one that actually had like big frets on it. And I was like, oh, So this is when jumbo frets, so that's way easier.
Yeah. I've kicked around redoing my classical with jumbos.
Oh yeah, and then eventually got the Brian Moore. I think I'm skipping a few generations here, but I think a year or two I got the Brian Moore C55P. Man, I got a great deal on that as well. I think I paid like $800 for it. You can't even find those really for less than like $1,500. I think.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
And that is that's a really nice guitar. It's funny, like sometimes I'll kind of get in the mode of playing like the Carvin or the G&L, and they're pretty nice. And I kind of like just forget about playing the Brian Moore, and then I'll play the Brian Moore, and I'm like, why did I even bother playing the other ones? Like it just sounds so much better. It plays really nice. It's got so much more character. The electronics, the pickups, everything's so much just better on it. And then I got this a year and a half ago, which is an Eastman AR503. This is the first guitar I ever bought where I actually got to try it first.
Yep.
It's Southpaw Guitars. And then my most recent acquisition was the K-Line, which I have over here, but it's kind of behind stuff. K-Line Telly, which is the best guitar I have. Even better than the Brian Moore.
Okay, there you go.
So, actually, it doesn't play quite as easy as the Brian Moore, but it has so much more like life and character to it. So
yeah. Oh yeah, that thing screams just acoustically. Like I remember you sending the videos. It's like impressive.
Yeah, it's kind of funny when you like hear it just acoustically how much louder it is. So
cool.
So, yeah.
There's our.
So what will be next? Who knows?
Yeah, that's. I mean,
I was looking at Chapman sticks this week. I studied with a Chapman stick player, Steve Adelson, in New York.
Yeah, I watched him over the videos. He was on YouTube or something way back in the day. I remember seeing him because he had like the weird like horn things coming out of the bottom of the. Is this the same guy? The horn coming out of the Chapman stick?
You're not thinking of Tony Levin, right?
No. Definitely this guy because it was at a club in New York, like a video. Maybe that was something.
He might have. He has a lot of sticks, so I'm not sure. But I used to study with him. I did all this like 2-hand tapping stuff, and he's like, "You gotta get a stick." And I remember I had actually saved money for it. I don't remember how much they were at the time. It would have been like 2005. I had all the money saved. I was like, the next day I was gonna order it, and my roommate was like, "I'm leaving. I'm going back home." And I'm like, crap. I didn't have enough. I needed like money to cover rent and all these kind of things. Yeah. So I was like, So I never ordered it. And now they're a decent amount more money. They might be like double what they cost then.
I've always been curious about that. Of course, I can't really do that because I've actually gotten to a point. If I'm going to tap, I'll use my pinky.
Yeah, I think it's probably a distraction. I don't tap as much as I used to, and I'm.
Oh yeah.
I'm like my dad was like this too. Like I'm like, oh cool, I want to do this, I want to do this, I want to do this, and. Like I do like a lot of like visual art stuff and drawing, and I love doing all those things. But I'm like Tim, you gotta just pick like something, just focus. And I don't tend to do that very well. So sometimes I'm like, I probably shouldn't really be worrying about tapping and stuff. I should hone in on the things I'm good at or whatever. Anyway,
that's a whole other discussion of where do you spend your time practicing to improve, and are you wasting your time going through the new flashy technique that'll be gone in a couple of days, or is it going to be really a good technical thing to have under your belt because it's unique and it's completely usable?
Keep that thought in mind, and then that reminds me of another topic we should bring up at some point. Like, I don't know about you, but long ago I had a vision of what I was hoping to be guitar-wise and what that thing was. I didn't really know how to quantify what it is or whatever, or tell you what it was. But it still like rings in the back of my head what that thing is, and I still couldn't tell you exactly what it is. But I do think that I like tap on the things that it was. Like there's part of that was like this just ability to tap and go anywhere on the guitar and do all these kind of things. That was always part of the long-term vision of where I was hoping to go. Yeah, be curious to talk to you about that too.
Yeah, let's save that because I could immediately start going down that rabbit hole without a problem.
Yeah. We'll try to remember, folks.
Yeah, that's easy for me to do. I'll write it down.
Yeah, and I won't.
You'll improvise it. Exactly. All right, folks. Thanks for listening. It's been a fun time.
Yep. Peace.